Hello and welcome to our constellation of the week. And this week we are going to talk about Leo the Lion. So if you go into the module overview for this particular module down at the bottom in our constellations, you will see Leo the Lion. We have all of the constellations we've done to this point have all been circumpolar. They've been the ones that go around Polaris for us in the northern hemisphere. And now we're looking at a series of constellations that will be rising and setting. And so this is the constellation we're going to look for, and it actually does kind of look like a lion. And the key elements we're going to look for in the night sky is this backwards question mark, or like a sickle for harvesting grasses or wheats, things like that. And so this is the easiest thing to see in the night sky. And then the other part that's easy to pick out is this long triangle that you have in the back. And if you've ever watched a cat kind of when it's sitting, like a sphinx, right, on its stomach with its front paws tucked up, and you have that nice little triangle of its back legs when the feet are flat on the ground. That's what it kind of reminds me of. You have the head right here, and then there's this little front piece where the feet could be, and then back here this triangle of the top of its hip bones, and then the back, and then its foot right here. The one nice thing about Leo, and this is one of our constellations that we start looking at in the springtime, is this is an area of the night sky where we start picking up lots and lots of galaxies to see. And so we're going to do the next couple of constellations that we see kind of around that whole let's go find galaxies in our night sky. And primarily we're going to take a look at this little set of galaxies right here. They're called the Leo Trio. And so we'll look at that using Stellarium. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up Stellarium Web and use that as our tool for today. All right. So when you first open up Stellarium, you can pretty much set this up for any springtime date to start with. And with all things, we normally have been using Ursa Major as a tool to help us find the other constellations so far, like Ursa Minor, the baby bear, or Cassiopeia, the queen. And we're going to keep with Ursa Major, the big bear, and the asterism, the Big Dipper, to help us find Leo. So again, if you want to start by looking to the north, just to get your frame of reference, because that's where we've been looking. And we can see Ursa Major right here. So here's the handle of the dipper, the bowl of the dipper. So also that's the tail of the bear. And then the feet are going to be helpful this time. So her feet are way up here, reaching high in the sky. Her shoulders, her nose, and her front feet as well. So we're going to use that. But instead of using the part of the dipper where the water comes out, like we have been to find Ursa Minor, we're going to use these two stars at the bottom of the dipper, and we're going to look the opposite direction. So we are going to be heading actually over towards the south. So let me show you two things that are going to be helpful this time around. So if you remember, if you go over to the three lines, they act like three dashes, and it allows us to change our settings. So just as a reminder, I'm going to put this meridian line up, right? So the meridian line is an imaginary line that runs from due north to due south directly over your head. So you can see it going through Polaris, and you can see it going just past the two stars of the Big Dipper. And then if we were to crane our heads up and really look straight up overhead, right? So this is the piece, this is our zenith, the part that's directly over our head. And then we can kind of just turn around and follow that imaginary line, right, all the way to the south. All right, so there is that imaginary line. So that imaginary line is going to take us from Ursa Major, and it's going to bisect. It's going to go right through the middle of Leo the Lion. And so normally the way I find Leo in the night sky is I'll either just extend that meridian down And the distance I want to go is about, if I take my hands and ball them up in fists, and I put one fist at the bottom, the closed end of the dipper, and then line my fists up one after the other, then that's going to put me in the right spot. I can also take these two easternmost stars of the dipper, and I can do the same fist thing with these guys, and this will actually take me to a very, very bright star right there, and that's Regulus. So it's regal, kind of goes with lion. It's really easy to understand that way. And so this is a star that really, really stands out. It's very bright, hard to miss. So let's turn off the meridian because it served its purpose, and we want to be able to see the lion once we turn on our artwork. So once I go through and I say, okay, so Leo's in this area, and I've got Regulus right here, the asterism, right, the little picture that we see that's part of the constellation or spans many constellations, is the backwards question mark or that sickle, the same thing that we looked at in the star map. And here it is. So we start at the bottom, and then we're going to go up, and then we're going to curve around to the west. And here is that backwards question mark. And when you're in nice dark skies, this really stands out. And so if this is the question mark and this is Regulus, then we can go to the east, and then we'll see this triangle of stars, also nice and bright. So let's turn on the constellation lines. And so there's Leo, so there's the backwards question mark or the sickle, and then those back haunches. And we'll go ahead and turn on the artwork as well. And there's our lion. So let's get a little bit closer to the lion. So we're looking at Leo right now, and then there's a couple of other constellations nearby. Directly kind of behind to the east of Leo is Virgo, the maiden, and then just above it is Coma Berenices, and this is a lock of hair. But this region right here is full of galaxies. In fact, when you're looking at a telescope, often you can have, 3 or 4 or more galaxies all within one eyepiece. And so that's really kind of exciting. All right, so let's just go ahead and get a little bit closer to Leo here. So we have Leo the lion, and there's Regulus, and that first set of stars that first set of little galaxies, the Leo trio that we want to see, come off his back leg here. So we have this triangle, right? And so we have Denebola on the one end towards his tail. I always think of it as the back haunches, with Regulus at the front end at his chest. And then we have this little star right here, and it's Cheriton. And so we're going to use that star. And you can see we've got a chain of stars down here that kind of kick back like a leg. And this is the area that we are going to look in. So we're going to just I'm going to center us up here, and I'm just going to keep moving us in. And what we can do now in Stellarium, I'm going to turn off the artwork because it's going to get in the way. So let's go ahead and go, oops, didn't mean to do that. Push you back up there. I'm going to turn off the artwork, and I'm going to turn off, I'll leave the lines up. They're a good reference, right? So we still have Cheriton here. We still have these bright stars making that back leg, and we start to see some blurriness right here. So I'm going to turn on the deep sky object marker, right? It's going to give us a little hint, and it's going to give us that little blue oval right here that's basically telling us that we're getting in the right spot. And so here we're going to zoom in, and it's sitting there on the Leo trio or the Leo triplet. It's only one. There's 1, 2, 3. All 3 of these fuzzy objects are actually galaxies. And so I'm going to turn that little circle off so that we can see them. And so they're right there. So this one is almost face on, and that's Messier 66. So it's the one that's kind of facing us. And then the other 2 we see at different angles. This one is completely edge on to us, but it's a really nice way to take a look at that disk galaxy and recognize that we're going to be, when we look at things in space, we're seeing everything in 3 dimensions. And so our perspective of what we can see is going to be different than any other part of our own galaxy when they're looking in different directions. But to see a spiral galaxy edge on really kind of drives home that how flat they are, how disk-like they are. So these are all three spiral galaxies, and they're all three very, very different. Okay, and so let's go ahead and just zoom in on this one just a little bit more, kind of pulling it towards us. And again, there we go. See? So it has these kind of two big arms that are reaching out. And then these guys, you can see them just kind of their arms are pretty tightly woven in there. So very, very interesting galaxies to take a look at. And if you look at this particular area with a telescope, you can get all three of these in the same view. They'll be on the edges, but they'll all be there in the same view. The other thing about this particular trio, though, of galaxies and why I chose them is because if you can get someplace nice and dark and you have a pair of like 10 by 50 binoculars, you're not going to see what the picture that we just saw. You'll see, though, the fuzzy objects, but you do need to find some place dark. So I know a lot of you, when we talked about in our introductions, you mentioned being able to go out when you visited other friends and families to dark sites. In our area, heading out towards Mount Rainier, the Capitol Forest, all of those areas are really nice and dark. And looking in this area gives you a chance to see with a pair of binoculars kind of those fuzzy galaxies. And if you do that, it will look like, let me see if I have that picture up. It will look a little bit like this. So this is, again, the Stellarium, the desktop version, and when you're in it, you can use this little ocular mechanism, and you can flip through the different types of telescopes and binoculars that are in there. So I grabbed a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars just to see what it looked like, and you will, like again, dark skies, you could see those fuzzy little points. All right, one last thing about Leo. So it's the first non-circumpolar, the first rising and setting constellation that we've talked about. But another thing is that Leo sits on another imaginary line we call the ecliptic, and so this is a good time to learn how to turn that on. So if we turn on the ecliptic line, and we're going to see that that line isn't running due north, south, or due east, west, right? But it is running through some different constellations that you might find familiar by name. In this particular time period, since we're looking at about 10 o'clock at night, we've got Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. So those may seem familiar names to you. This ecliptic, this path, is the path that we see the planets, the moon, and the sun kind of travel along. They won't be exactly on the line. You can see Venus right here, but they're within a band, right? So they're within a band running with this ecliptic line running right down the center. So that's handy because when we're trying to identify objects that seem to be very bright and not part of the constellation as we remember it, if it's running along this ecliptic, it's very likely going to be one of our planets, right? So we see Venus is a very good example right there. And then if we change time and let time go across, we'll pull Leo down closer to the horizon. So Leo gets followed by Virgo, Libra, Scorpius, Ophiuchus, Sagittarius, and then right here, just before the sun comes up, we have Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn in a row right along this band of the ecliptic. So it is the path of the planets that we see, and it's the path, and that banded path is where we see the sun and the moon run through as well. Okay. All right, so why don't you go ahead and go outside and see if you can find Leo on your own.